saw this, it's kind of funny because that's how it is with us sometimes. What I mean is, when they showed this, there's a couple video clips of it. People were mocking this guy because the guy's talking about this major storm and people are walking right behind him. I don't know if you noticed that. People were walking right behind him. And they said, this guy is exaggerating the storm. Watch him. He puts his foot down. Yeah, yeah. And people are walking right behind him, walking all around. It wasn't that big at all. They said, it blew up, I guess, on the internet. People were making fun of the guys, and this guy exaggerated his storm. And sometimes that's how it is with us. We exaggerate our storms. People come to me often and they say something to me, and I think they're going to tell me there's some storm that's just unbelievable, and I start talking to them and listen to it, and I think that's not a storm. And as a pastor, you can't say what you really think you want to say. You want to say, are you for real? You didn't just tell me that, and that's a storm for you. That's a trial. It's amazing. Until you talk to somebody or you meet somebody and you hear some of their problems and some of the things they're dealing with. I was talking to someone actually just this week, actually. And I've said this before. Going to see my girlfriend at Loma Linda, one thing it does do for me, honestly, is it brings me face to face with how blessed I am. Because I have to go through when I go get my shots for my knees, I go through all the pain people are at, where people get all these different shots and medications. And I see these babies, they're deformed, mothers loving them, being kind. I see adults, I see husbands, I see wives, and all these different conditions. Sitting right there, I'm sitting down, and I'm not saying I am, but it seems like I'm the most normal one there. And I look around, I see these people, and I say to myself, I don't have no problems. I'm sure I'm blessed. You see this and go, my God. I say, God, you're so good. I can walk in, I can walk out. I'm so blessed. And sometimes you don't realize this. I was talking to someone this week, because this is not what I originally wanted to speak about. But this kept coming to me, and I couldn't get this off my mind. I was talking to a friend, actually a pastor. And we just started talking about his life, his calling. And I just listened to him. I find out when I talk to pastors, a lot of pastors just need someone to listen to because they listen to everybody else. And so I was just listening to the pastor. I really wasn't saying anything. I just let him talk. And he says to me, he reminds me of some things in his life. He said, well, 7 years ago, I remember, Kerry, I had cancer in my kidney. I said, wow, I forgot about that. I had a car accident. Right after that, he was driving a car going to Ritchie Canyon and his brakes went out. Totaled his car. And then right after that, he found out he had kidney cancer, was treated. 7 years later, he has prostate cancer. And when he's diagnosed with his prostate cancer, his wife of 35 years leaves him. And on top of all of that, it all started out in the ministry with his son being murdered. And he tells me this story, reminds me of some things he's gone through, and I'm just listening. I said, I don't have no words for that. I can't relate to that. And he left a good job, making a really good lot of money, to be involved in the ministry. And he says, I don't regret any of it. He said, I wish it wouldn't happen this way. He said, but I have nothing else to go back on. And honestly, I can say from my heart, I don't regret what's happened. I don't understand what's happened, but I don't regret it. Hearing this man speak, I thought, because here's a man, no doubt, his life, his ministry, up to this point anyway, has been very, very difficult. And when people are disappointed, I think disappointment, I chose this because I'm talking about it today and next Thursday. Disappointment, I think disappointment has taken more people out of the kingdom of God than drugs and sin.
Yeah. Come on.
Most of the time, if I talk to someone or if you talk to somebody, and they're a former Christian, went to church, served God for any length of time, and they're not serving God today, usually they don't point immediately to some sin. They will end up in sin. Usually they end up in disaster at the end. But at the beginning, they will say something like this: well, I feel like, I've heard this 1,000 times, I feel like God has let me down. So I'm going to talk tonight about God, you let me down, dealing with our disappointment. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 12, when your hope is crushed, the heart is crushed. But a wish come true fills you with joy. When your hope is crushed, the heart is crushed. So we're talking about disappointment. When I say disappointment, it can just mean something in your own life where you feel like God didn't show up or God didn't do the miracle you asked him to do, or maybe you didn't receive an answer you were hoping for. But basically I'm saying maybe something you wanted God to do at a particular time, a particular way, and he didn't do it. And I believe this. I believe disappointment has taken more Christians away from God than drugs and sin, because it is a very real thing to deal with. And it's a very difficult thing to deal with. Every one of us, if you live for God for very long, you will find yourself disappointed. And I'm talking about disappointment with God because it's something we know happened. It's not something we talk about. It's almost like we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to say that. God, you disappointed me, or God, you didn't come through. Let me just throw this in. It's not in my notes, but God's not afraid of your questions. Read the book of Psalms. David says all kinds of things to God. He says, God, why have you forsaken me when I needed you most? God, where are you? I cry out to you, but you don't answer. God, I cry to you. You don't hear me when I pray. You read the book of Psalms. David says all these. But the difference between David and a lot of people, David knows enough. He's got enough sense in God, in his walk with God. He knows that if he talks to him, he needs to talk to God about this and not other people sometimes. There's nothing wrong with talking, to confiding in somebody that's a strong Christian. But David knows something. I have these struggles that are very deep and very real, but I need to take these to God, and he does. That's the difference. God's not afraid of you saying, where are you? But just say it to him. God's not afraid of you saying, God, you didn't come through. Or God's not afraid of you saying to him, God, you really disappointed me. Just say it to him. When you and I are disappointed, I don't think our minds think much about the enemy. Because when you and I are in our own personal disappointment, our mind is where? I'll tell you where our mind is. Our mind is on our need of the moment. And usually it's either a pressing need, a pressing miracle, a great desire, a great dream that has captivated our mind, captivated our emotions. It's basically taken over us. And our mind is simply on that. And because our mind is on that, we aren't thinking about anything else. And unfortunately, you and I are not thinking about, we have a real spiritual enemy. And we don't always make the best choices when we're disappointed. We don't always make the best choices when you and I have a great need. I thought about Jesus. And Jesus, we read about in Matthew chapter 4 and Luke chapter 4. The temptation of Christ, and when it's recorded differently. It's twisted a couple of times. They're not the exact same temptations in order. Why? Because temptation can get you all mixed up real quick. And so here's Jesus. The devil says to Jesus, what did he say to him? I preached on this for the last 5 weeks. He says, you command these stones to be made bread. You're hungry. The Bible said Jesus was hungry. It's a great need. We know that. He has a very pressing need. He's been fasting for 40 days. You try fasting for a day. And fasting isn't drinking your shakes. It's a shake. Anyway, okay. The enemy comes to him and says to him, command these stones to be made bread. He's hungry. The Bible says that. He was hungry. And afterward the tempter came to him. When did the tempter come to him? It came to him when he was very hungry. He has a pressing need. Well, if God knows my need needs to be met. Just because God knows your need doesn't mean that your need needs to be met right then and there.
Come on.
We get confused. We think because I have a pressing need, that means God should meet it right now. Whoever said that? Yeah. And the devil lays it out to him, and then he lays out the world to him, lays out everything. And unfortunately, I've seen Christians very disappointed And in their disappointment, they make some terrible choices. And here's they come back and they say, well, I didn't get this, but Pastor, I'm really blessed. Well, define blessing to me. The enemy, listen to me, all blessings don't come from God.
Come on.
But you don't realize that because once you're in it, you're in it. That's all there is to it. It's got you. The enemy offered Jesus everything. He could have said, perfect, I got needs in my life. He wants to give me glory, give me everything, fame, you name it, I'll have it all. What does the Bible say? What good is a man gain the whole world and lose his own soul?
Amen.
Oh yeah, you can have all of that, but it's going to take you right out of the known will of God for your life. And you're a fool to do it, but we ain't thinking about the will of God when you and I are in it. All we're thinking about is our moment in time. If our life is struggling, there's difficulty, nothing's working out maybe the way we wanted it to, that's all we're thinking about. We're not thinking about our future. We're thinking about our pressing need right here and right now. And we're not thinking about an enemy of our soul that's going to take advantage of any circumstance. Any open door in your mind, he wants real estate in your mind. He wants to captivate your mind and begin to work in your mind, and he works very slowly. You serve God, you know that. People think the battle is just for today. Let me tell you, the battle for your life is not just for your today, it's for your tomorrows. Amen. The enemy is attacking you. You're thinking about tomorrow, and he's thinking about 25 years from today. But we don't see that. We don't think that. We don't talk about that. Because this is where we're at this moment. This guy was talking to his pastor, and his wife has some kind of disease, and I think it was cancer. And the pastor tells this young man, he says, listen, God will heal her. And he says, but she is so sick. She hardly gets out of bed, Pastor. The pastor says to her, God is going to heal her. He might heal her body now. He might heal her soul in heaven. But you can trust me, God will heal her. And here's what it means. The triumph doesn't always happen the way we think it should. Sometimes we only triumph over our struggles as we leave this broken world. Yeah. We can trust him in our disappointments, no matter what it is. And when you see somebody, you think about the world, what the world offers. Money, fame. But let's be honest, most of us aren't going to be famous. You're not struggling with being famous, trust me. I know you're waiting to be on American Idol. Well, forget it. We'll do a church idol, you wouldn't make it on that one, okay. We'll call it wannabes. But no, there's a lot of good talent, I know all that, but when you really think about this, if the Christian life, if there really is an afterlife, or we take the other position, there is no afterlife, then like Paul said, if there's no afterlife, then eat, drink, and be merry, because there's nothing you can live for, there's no future. And so if there is no afterlife, then it makes perfect sense for someone to live any way they want to live, do anything they want to do, go anywhere they want to go, buy, material, whatever it is, be blessed, have money, have all of that, if they really believe there's no afterlife. But if you believe there's an afterlife, and you've been saved, and it bears witness with you that you know that there's something more than this life, you know that as a Christian. You know inside of your heart, once you get saved, there's got to be more than this world. Amen. Right? You know that. So there's got to be more than what's in this world. If this is all there is, it stinks. There's got to be more than this cursed world, and there really is. And so that's a position as a Christian. Then it makes perfect sense to sacrifice. It makes perfect sense to give your life to Christ, everything you have, and just be all about Jesus, serving him, following his will, trying to get as many people to heaven as possible. Amen. But when someone doesn't believe that, unfortunately, many Christians don't. And that's why they live the way they live. You show me someone that's running after the world who names the name of Christ, I'll show you someone who really does not believe in the afterlife. Because if they did, they would not be living this way. They'd be living for the world to come.
Amen.
Are you with me?
Come on.
All that is for free. That's just preach stuff.
Amen.
Let's get into this. Story. True story. A couple of them. Then we'll ask you a few questions. This guy, kind of hard to talk and drink at the same time. Yeah. One or the other, Gary. Mono man. All men are mono man. Remember that, wife and that husband. He will announce what he's doing. I'm going outside now. Why? That's how they think. One thing at a time. That has nothing to do with this, but there you go. They even announce it when they go to the restroom. That's for free. I'm going to the restroom. You think I care? Go. Dear Lord. Trust me, we will all know you went to the restroom. This guy's a multi-billionaire. And during his 20s, he was an outspoken atheist. When he was 15, his younger sister, Mary Jane, 12, contracted lupus, a degenerative disease, tissue disease. For 7 years, her body was racked with severe pain and constantly vomiting, and her screams filled their house. He regularly would come home and hold her hand and try to comfort her, and he would pray to God for her healing and recovery. But after many years of misery and struggling, she finally died. The father of the child said, if that's the type of God he is, I want nothing to do with him. The other boy, who's the brother of the girl that died, had a very powerful, listen to me, had a very powerful effect on his mind. Let me stop there. The words we speak have power.
Amen.
Life and death are in the power of the tongue. He continues. This young man says, I was taught, and his father also, I was taught that God was love and God was so powerful. I couldn't understand how an awesome, loving God would allow someone so innocent to suffer and die. That same man, the father of the young girl who did this, on his one day in 1963, he had breakfast with his wife, went upstairs and took a .38 and put it inside his mouth and pulled the trigger. The young man that I'm speaking about, his name was Ted Turner. Ted Turner, listen to this, got saved and was on fire for Jesus, and believe it or not, he was planning on being a missionary. Ted Turner, a multi-billionaire, he started CNN. We won't talk about that. He started other programs. He started, I think it was the first one with news all the 24/7. The guy's a multi-billionaire. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he got saved, radically saved, loved Jesus, wanted to be a missionary, win the world for Christ, but this is what happened in his life. His sister suffers from this disease and dies. His dad is struggling. I don't know if his dad was a believer, but they had some faith in God. But he did have faith in God. When his dad began to say these things, if this is the God you serve, and then young Ted Turner just couldn't reconcile all this, his father saying these words. Because when you are disappointed, you can say some things, and the truth is you're not thinking about the effect of your words on other people while you're saying them.
Come on.
And in this article it said it was Ted Turner's father that pushed him over the edge. His father said, if that's the God you believe in, I can't believe in a God like that. And they said that was a turning point in Ted's life. Young Ted, instead of being a missionary, turned his back on God and actually spoke out against God. And then as he got older, he stopped doing that. So he could have been a missionary, could have been a Christian, but he was a billionaire. He dies. I don't know if he's still alive. Someone can Google it real quick. Nick, I hate to wake you up. Google Ted Turner. See if he's still alive. But if he is still alive, he dies a billionaire. Does he win or lose? A billionaire or a missionary and or a Christian? But Jesus said, what good is it you gain the whole world and you lose your soul? He lost. That same man that started the program, Ted Turner, who started the other TBS, this guy was in the hands of God. Jesus planned on using it. He wanted to be a missionary, win the world for Christ. But when these disappointments came to his life, his family, his dad, that was it. He couldn't reconcile none of this and lost his faith in God. Why God? He said, God let me down. And I don't understand it all. Obviously, we don't know. But there waiting in the wings was the enemy of the soul. He says, you come. I'll gladly take you, Ted. We'll make you a billionaire. And he made him a billionaire, but he lost his soul. Just because he was disappointed. And again, I say, if you believe there is no afterlife, then go after the world with all you have. Just pour your sorrow, do it all. But if there really is an afterlife, and we believe there really is, then the best thing you can do, the wisest thing you can do, is give your life to Christ and live honestly, live for Him, make decisions for Him. And when you see someone who don't do that, the bottom line is they do not really believe in their heart of hearts there's an afterlife. You know what's crazy? They say one of the problems with millennials, you folks are bringing all this out of me. I say none of my notes. But one of the problems with millennials is that they are trying to stack life. And what I mean by that is they're trying to have it all figured out. They want this life. They want to completely control life. They think they honestly can control life. Let me tell you something. News alert, you can't control life.
Come on.
You can plan for everything you want. And we've seen it happen in our own fellowship. You have everything planned, and the wife gets cancer and dies. Or her husband gets drops dead, whatever it might be. You can't plan for those things. They said the problem with some of the millennials is they're trying to plan for everything, and they're forgetting to live life now. They'll wake up 40 years old. Listen, now, they're the generation that's getting married the latest in life. They're going to wake up and be 40 or 50 and finally going to get married. Start having kids. At 50? There ain't no Spark and Clark at 50 and 60. At 60 years old and having a child? He's 15, you're 75. You can't, anyway, I get off track. Okay, let me get back to what I was talking about here, okay. Here's another guy, he's a famous skeptic. And this is what he writes. He says, I think that, in fact, God Almighty appeared to me, if God Almighty appeared to me and gave me an explanation that can make sense of all the pain in the world, all the slaughter of the innocent children, and the explanation that was so overpowering that I could actually understand it, then I'd be the first to fall on my knees in humble submission and adoration to Him. But on the other hand, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Hoping that it was probably just wishful thinking. A leap of faith made by those who are so desperate in life, both to remain faithful to God and want to believe in a God, just so they can cope with the realities of life. This guy who writes this is a scholar, a New Testament scholar, that believed in the reality of Jesus Christ. He's one of the sharpest guys there is, but there came a point in time where he finally lost his faith because he couldn't understand all the disappointments that had no answers. And if you ask him today, he will prove to you that Jesus Christ was alive. He just never believed that Jesus Christ was God. He said, historically, I can prove to you that He walked this earth, but I don't believe He was God. There's too many things wrong with this world. Disappointment. Listen to this one. This man is a famous man. I'll tell you who he is in a moment. His wife has a bout of bone cancer. Obviously, he prayed for her to be healed, and she was not healed. Very difficult time in his life. He said, I can't understand why God is always there when things are going well, telling you what he expects of you. But to go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain, what do you find? A door slammed in your face, a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that silence, you may as well just turn away. The longer you wait, the more the silence becomes. There are no lights in the windows. It might be an empty house. Was it ever inhabited? It seemed so once. Why is God so present and commander in the time of our prosperity and blessing, and very absent in help in time of trouble? The man who wrote that was named C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest Christians that's ever lived. And what's crazy about that quote I just read to you, if you don't know who C.S. Lewis was, you can look him up. You probably read some of his books, Chronicles of Narnia and other things. He wrote that when he was a Christian. He didn't write that when he left God or he found God. He wrote that as a Christian. But they said that somehow in this great difficulty, this personal disappointment, he found God in a deeper way.
Amen.
Because we have a choice in our disappointment. Disappointment is going to drive us somewhere. Somehow he was strengthened from this severe disappointment with God, and he says it. And that quote I just gave you, I don't think you can see those put on posters. In fact, you very seldom even see him quoted. But that was the reality of his personal life, and he said so. But through it, it deepened his faith, because this brings me to this point. Wow. What do you do when God disappoints you? There's three things, and I'll share one story. I'm going to have to stop there. There are three things. Actually, there's many more, but I just put down three. You can lose your faith, like Ted Turner. And you can have the attitude, I guess God's not there, and turn your, even though you've had a radical conversion, because you can't reconcile the pain, all that's going on in people's lives, and your own life in particular at the time. You can't reconcile, you can lose your faith. You can isolate the question from your faith. In other words, I don't know, I have an answer for it, and just forget it, and I don't want to deal with it. Or you can choose to, like C.S. Lewis, somehow in this brokenness, he found a deeper walk with God. You can press into a deeper walk with God. Now, which one do you think is easier? Lose your faith, isolate it, or press in? Which one of those three is the easiest one to do? Nick? Lose your faith. You know why? Because it don't take no faith to lose your faith. In our mind, we think it's the easiest one to do, but actually it is the most easiest one to do, but it is very, very difficult to live out once you've met Christ. Let me tell you why. Because once you've met Christ, and I've preached about it, I've talked about it, these last 5 services about the voice of God, especially on Sunday. If you weren't here, you get the sermon, great sermon.
Amen.
But all along, when we're going through these things, if we're really honest with ourselves, there is the voice of God that's talking to us all along the way.
Amen.
Isn't that true? It would be easier almost, like if that didn't happen. If God wasn't talking to us along the way, we went through the disappointment, the heartache, the pain, the brokenness, and we never hear from God, that'd be different. Then I can understand a little bit better maybe why the struggle. But even in the midst of it, God talks to us. And boy, does that make it difficult. Because God speaks to us, and we know what we should do. We know how we're supposed to respond. And we know because we know. There's one thing I've discovered that I thought about, but I won't do a little small series on things discovered or things learned along the way, is this. When I've had my hardest times, yes, questions, I can honestly say, and I have not doubted God. That's different. I'm not that smart to doubt God. But when I've really been broken in pieces, and the truth is, the things I have gone through, things you have gone through are very real. And like myself and like yourself, I'm sure there's a lot of things you can never share with anyone. There's things me and wife have gone through here that no one will ever know about because we can't share these. They're just for obvious reasons. There's no way we can share it. But you've known enough about brokenness, heartache, and pain, and that by the grace of God, you make it through it, and you're not sure how you're going to make it through if you're honest. But when I found myself that I've actually made it through, you know, when you're in it, you're not trying to make it through it, you're just trying to survive it. It literally is. Sometimes it seems like a day at a time, and sometimes it's worse than that. It's a moment at a time. It's an hour at a time. And you find this, and you make it through without even realizing it. You find out that your faith has grown and you become stronger, and you don't even realize it until after the fact. You're in it, you're broken, you're disappointed, and you're literally fighting for your spiritual life. And you don't have no idea how you're going to make it through. But once you realize you make it through, you don't realize this, but looking back, you say to yourself, I'm stronger. You know what it's called? It's called the grace of God. Let's bow our heads tonight. I have to stop there because of the time. With our heads bowed tonight, I didn't even get to our text. Was going to be the other one besides the one in Proverbs about when your hope is crushed, your heart is crushed. But when the wish comes true, you're filled with joy. That was the opening text, but the main text was going to be from the book of John, Martha and Mary. And I'll get to that next week. I said it in the beginning, and I will say it again quickly here. Disappointment has taken more people out of the kingdom of God than drugs and sin. And that's where we end up. But that's not how it starts out. Ted Turner wanted to be a missionary, win the world for Jesus. He became a billionaire. Did he win? No, he didn't win. He lost his soul. Jesus said, what good is it to gain the whole world and you lose your soul? We're here tonight because we are professing Christians. We believe in an afterlife. We believe with all our hearts a life to come. And we believe that. We hold to that, and we realize, okay, this is not all there is. There's more coming. There's more. It's beyond the pain. It's beyond the disappointment. And we choose to. Somehow C.S. Lewis said that he made it through this, and his faith was actually strengthened. Even though he had deep questions about God and the pain his wife went through. And he told God, basically, God, you're not there when I need you the most. God's not afraid for you to say that to him. But what he wants you to do is make sure you say it to him. And I don't know where you're here, where you're at tonight. Kind of took a life of its own. There's people here tonight. I don't know all the things you've gone through in your life. But let me tell you who does. God does. And some of you have had some great disappointment. Some of you sit here tonight in disappointment. We have to make a choice. And I don't think we make the choice to press into our faith when we're in it. We simply choose to keep walking forward. and you're here tonight, and you're Christians, you know what, God, you're talking to me about some things. There isn't one person here tonight that God didn't know you were going to be here. And you're here tonight, and say, you know what, God, you're talking to some things deep, deep down in my soul. Raise your hand tonight, that's you. All over this place. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, I see these hands. So my question to the Christian is, has this world called you away from Christ? Money and things. The devil said, turn these stones to bread. I'll give you the world. Not every blessing comes from God. Remember that. The enemy's plan for your tomorrow is 25 years from today, not today. Maybe you're here tonight. Maybe you're not a Christian. Before we end this service, I want to give you the opportunity to meet Christ. You want to give your life to Christ, or to lift up your hand. We'd like to pray with you to receive Christ as your Savior. Would you lift up your hand tonight? Let's all stand in this congregation tonight. Let's all stand. We'll sing a worship song. Many hands were raised. Just come and find a place to pray. Let God minister to your life and help you tonight.